happy family. There's simply no motive for Alex to do this.
The defense, ladies and gentlemen, stood up here and clicked through a bunch of family pictures and accused the state of trying to inflame the passions of the jury. They're smarter than that. They want you to find some significance and some relevance in the fact that when Sabrina and Alexander Jackson were little and they went on a bunch of family vacations, that this family was happy. I'm sure they were. I hope they were. What you don't see in any of those photographs are any pictures that are recent of this family. We ask yourself what goes on behind closed doors and you don't know. No recent family photos. And witness after witness after witness the defense put up, they did a good job of testifying about the defendant's character 4 or 5 years ago. Same 4 or 5 years ago, if not more, that you see in these photographs. There aren't recent family pictures of the Jacksons hanging on those walls. The only recent pictures of the Jacksons are them laid out on a cold slab in the medical examiner's office. Because the defendant murdered his family, ladies and gentlemen. That's the only scenario in this situation that makes sense. That's the only scenario in this situation that is supported by and consistent with the evidence that was found. This was not some random intruder that breaks in and executes a family that he doesn't know with a gun that he didn't bring with the hope to steal things that are never stolen. Where there's a struggle with a huge man and a tall man, a black man with green shoes wearing all black and a ski mask with gloves on. Makes no sense. The murderer in this case that you're looking for, ladies and gentlemen, is seated right behind me. And that murderer is Alexander Jackson.
Whose side are you on? The right side, left side, the inside, the outside, or familicide? Further, authorities reportedly said that just prior to the slayings, Jackson's father had ordered his son to get a job or find somewhere else to live. Jackson, who had only $30 in his personal bank account at the time of the murders, stood to inherit more than $2 million. Look at that. So this was financial based. Jackson only had $30 in his personal bank account at the time of the murder. He stood to inherit more than $2 million from his parents' estate, the Gazette reported. Due to his conviction, other family members will reportedly inherit the Jackson family estate. So, what an idiot.
Yo, what up, y'all? It's your boy Rob coming back at you once again with another video. So before we get started, you already know what to do. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit the bell icon twice. Smash the like button, share this video out to all of your followers, and let's get it cracking. All right. So what we have today is an article from the Gazelle, and what this article is about is another familicide. All right. An individual from Cedar Rapids gets 3 consecutive life sentences in the slaying of his family. Now, this is an interesting story, and shout out to everybody that watches Crimecast. If you're not subscribed to @BLR Crimecast on YouTube, you might want to go over there and subscribe to that channel because that's where we talked about this first. All right. But the interesting thing about this is that this individual annihilated his entire family, shot himself in the foot, and told the police that it was a black guy that did it. Now, here's my thing, right? When the PC, you know what I'm saying, the privileged cucks, decide to do things like this, they should tack on federal hate crime charges if you lie and say that a black person committed your crime. Knowing what the United States has done to the black image, as well as what the mainstream media currently maintains as far as a negative black image, anytime a member of the privileged cucks decides to do something like this, they should be held accountable because that's a hate crime. You know, because all you have to do is just say a black person, and then automatically every single one of us fits the description. So this individual said that a black man who was about 6'7", wearing all black, came into his house, shot up his entire family, and then shot him in the foot and left. Now, what happens if in the suburbs, where this usually happens, some Karen happened to see a 6'6" black man, or some Chad happened to see a 6'6" black man, and they said, hey, you know what I'm saying? This guy fits the description. They call the police. Next thing you know, some 6'6" black man is walking down the street, and all of a sudden they get ran up on by the police. This guy's like, hey, what are you guys talking about? What are you doing? You fit the description. Fit the description for what? Fit the description for everything that anybody wants to blame on you. And you're like, I literally just got here. You get tackled, you get killed because of the propaganda that the population at large has ran and is complicit with. Court of Public Appeals finds you guilty already. Memes going all over the place on Twitter. They're talking about your family and your kids and all your personal records out, and comes to find out this piece of crap annihilated his entire family because he wanted to get a $2 million inheritance because he's broke, he's dusty, and he only had $30 in his bank account and was failing out of college. You know what I'm saying? So now Cedar Rapids man gets 3 consecutive life sentences in slaying of his family. All right. A judge on Friday ran 3 life sentences consecutively without the possibility of parole for Alexander Ken Jackson, who was convicted in the fatal shooting of his father, mother, and sister June 15th of 2021 in their Northeast Cedar Rapids home. First Assistant Lynn County Attorney Monica Slaughter asked that Jackson, who was 22, serve consecutive sentences for the execution of his family, which shook the community to its core. Well, that community has definitely not watched the Surviving the Suburbs playlist on Blacklight Revelations 2. If you guys know anybody from that community, I'd advise you guys make sure you send them the playlist so that they understand their environment. The killings were abhorrent, heinous, and brutal, she said. Slaughter said each of these homicides were separate and distinct acts, and they warranted consecutive sentences. Okay. Each family member, father Jan Jackson, who was 61, mother Melissa Jackson, who was 68, and Sabrina, the sister, who was 19, died of multiple gunshot wounds fired from different distances, and each victim was shot up close and personal to ensure that they met death, Slaughter said. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to watch this video. All right. Because this video gives some interesting insights as to what happened with this situation and how this individual was handled. And trust me when I tell you that he was definitely handled with care. Jackson's actions following the shootings, including attempting to cover up the crimes, manipulating evidence, and shooting himself in the foot, which he blamed on a phantom intruder. Not a phantom intruder. The intruder, he didn't blame it on a phantom. A phantom is a ghost. He blamed this on a black man because it's a cultural practice to blame something that you do on somebody black. It's the American way. But we're not going to talk about that in the mainstream media because that's just going to shame us in our culture. You know what I'm saying? Demonstrate the need for life sentences, she said. It also demonstrates the need for hate crime attachments. 6th Judicial District Judge Lars Anderson said he agreed with the prosecution that the slayings were separate and distinct acts, that consecutive sentences were appropriate. Jackson, who showed no visible reaction or emotion during the sentencing, declined to make a statement. Per Iowa law, Anderson also ordered Jackson to pay $150,000 in restitution to the estate or heirs of his family. Family members who attended sentencing did not submit victim impact statements to the court. They also declined to talk to the Gazette after the hearing. After the verdict in January, Jan Jackson's sister, Jay Jackson, and his niece, Danielle Jackson Parsons, who were at Friday's sentencing, said the murders of their family members were a pain that will never go away. Jan, Melissa, and Sabrina were loved, they said in a joint statement. They will live on in our hearts and the hearts of those who knew them forever. A Lynn County jury found Alexander Jackson guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder in January, finding that he fatally shot his parents and sister in different rooms of their Northeast Cedar Rapids home. If the jury had not convicted him, he would have inherited more than $2 million from his parents' estates, according to the court documents. Because he was convicted, 2 other relatives of Jan and Melissa Jackson will inherit those assets, the documents show. According to the testimony, Jackson made a 911 call on June 15th of 2021, saying somebody had broken into the family's home at 4414 Oak Leaf Center, Northeast, and shot him in the foot, and also shot another family member. He could only describe the intruder as a black man in black clothing and green shoes. Now, when non-black people do this to black people, knowing the history in the United States, do you feel that hate crime attachments should be added? If you feel that federal hate crime attachments should be added when the privileged, aka non-black American members of the population do this to black people, give me a thumbs up. If you don't feel that way, then give me a thumbs down. And also for the PC people who will get upset and start whining and rolling around and heads turning in 360-degree angles on their necks because I said this, here's my question. Can anybody show me a news report of where a black person did this and blamed it on a white person and it was believed? Now, as far as this family goes, what did this family do? What did this family do to make it a family value where this individual feels that when he has to face accountability, his only way of escaping it would be to blame a black person? What family value of that was instilled into him? That's the question. Police found no forced entry and found nothing stolen or out of place in the home, according to the testimony. Officers found Jan Jackson in the home lower level with 5 gunshot wounds. Melissa Jackson was in the master bedroom with 3 gunshot wounds, and Sabrina Jackson was in her lower level bedroom next to Alexander's room with 2 gunshot injuries. A medical examiner said each family member died from multiple gunshot wounds and that Melissa Jackson had been shot in the eye at close range. Jackson never admitted to the police that he killed his family, and he was interviewed for several hours at the hospital while being treated for the gunshot wound to his left foot, but continued to blame the intruder. The intruder, by the way, who was black. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we are going to check out this video right here. Okay, and this video gives some insights as to how he was treated with care. Now, let me ask you guys a question. If this was a black person in this situation who had just done this to their family, would they be treated like this by the police and by the EMTs? And if they wouldn't be treated like this, then how would they be treated? Let me know in the comment section.
Home invasions happen. They happen, unfortunately, all over the country. And they happen for motives that we don't always understand.
I've been shot. My other family member's been shot. I need help immediately.
Who's this down here? Hey, who are you? Dad. Is that your dad? What happened? What happened?
He came down. There was a man.
Who else is here?
My sister.
She's back?
Yeah, she's in her room.
Is she okay?
I think so.
Sabrina? Sabrina?
When the officers made contact with the defendant, was he crying?
No.
He is in shock. To judge his responses and the way he said them and the accuracy of those things is tantamountably unfair.
When asked who he was home with, the defendant said that he was home with his sister. She was in her bedroom. Sabrina, I've been shot. Dad's been shot. Are you okay? Nothing. And the reason the defendant isn't calling out to his sister is because he knows that she's dead. He doesn't call out to his mom. Mom, I've been shot. Mom, are you okay? Mom, help me. Check on Dad. Because he knows his mother is also dead.
I'm sorry. You ran into who? Okay. You ran into how? Thank you. You ran into him. Like a fist or? Okay. Okay. So you were sleeping on the couch in the porch. Or sorry, you were sleeping in the porch? Yeah. Okay. Then what happened? Did you hear gunshots or what? Yeah. Okay, you heard gunshots. And then saw somebody in your house? Yeah. Okay. I think I have to figure out where we go. The fire, and then obviously that happened.
So when you and him were struggling with the gun?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And then he fired it?
Yeah.
And it shot you in the foot?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So, I saw everybody.
But not like having any bad thoughts lately. Okay.
But this last semester, you passed one class. Yeah, you did focus. And then, what about semester before that? I did okay. That's an overachiever, right? Yeah. I think you did well, okay. Yeah. I mean, how about mom? Is she an overachiever? Yeah, I guess. Sister? I don't really know her grades. Sure. She's trying to get an overachiever. Well, she works on stuff, I guess. Mm-hmm. Stuff, but you don't necessarily work on stuff, obviously, otherwise you pass more in class. You sound like you're throwing your money out, but this was zero taking the break. What was the break your choice or was it dad's? Because you don't always money out anymore. He promised to pay half my college. The half you passed or all of it. Just make sure that
His grades dropping during COVID? That's a reason to kill your whole family? Or he didn't have a job? How many kids didn't? How many kids had their grades drop during COVID?
I mean, we went through what she said, okay?
I want you guys to make sure that you read this part. Jackson told investigators a black man wearing black clothing had entered the Jackson family home and used their own rifle to shoot each family member. And the police clearly believed it. They didn't cuff this individual. They were handling him with care. And what I have to ask is, what is this? What does this mean? You know what I'm saying? What does this mean? The population at large needs to be charged with answering this question. Where did he get this from? Did he get this from his family that he felt was so worthless he executed like they were animals? Where did he get the values to do a heinous crime and then lay the blame on the black person and not stand behind his work? Did he get that from his family? Did he get that from his culture? Where did that come from?
I mean, we went through what she said, okay? Because we wanted to find, listen, I'll give you the respect and believe you until it just gets to the point where it's just fantasy now, okay? What do? We expedite the ring cameras because, hey, if we can see some guy coming and going from the house, that is what we need to see, and we don't see that. So in order for your story to be true, that means somebody would have had to bypass your ring cameras and not set them off. Get lucky enough that a door was unlocked and they picked the right door to be unlocked.
we don't usually get locked.
Okay, fine. But them to know that. Now, you call them an intruder, but I'm not going to call them that because nobody came in there to burglarize anything. They came in there to murder people because that's all that happened there. No items were taken. But if they came there to murder people, like you said, then they would have had to get lucky enough that you had left a gun out for them and left ammunition out so they could load the gun. And then be able to know right where everybody's at and shoot everyone and get in a fight with the biggest person in the house and have trouble with the gun and be able to escape without you hurting them or without them setting off the camera. So they've now come and gone and we have none of that. So we looked in, that's your story. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure I tell that story to you, you cannot sit there and look me in the eye and say, yeah, well, that did happen. Because come on, you just heard me say it. That's not even possible.
It doesn't happen.
It's not, Alex.
You developed that story before you had the camera back to your house.
One thing that I'm going to need people who watch the Surviving the Suburbs series consistently to start doing is start studying FBI statistics about familicide. And as we examine these particular segments of crime, drop statistical information in the comment section during the live chat about who it is that perpetrates familicides, where it is that familicides happen. And if they happen so much and have such a prevalence in certain areas, then why is it that the mainstream media, who's owned by people who are part of the culture that commit the most familicides, don't talk about it to warn themselves of these kind of things so that less of them fall victim. Again, these people sit there and say that somebody's waging a war on them. But when you wage a disinformation campaign that leads to harm, well, that's you waging a war on yourself. If you have too much pride to warn your own people about things that are common to your own people, and your own people continue to fall victim to them, you can't sit there and whine about a war on you without acknowledging the war that you're fighting against yourself. A family annihilation of a white family by a white male is absolutely a war on white people, but pay very close attention to who it is that's waging those wars and collecting casualties.
There's lots of things that somebody can enter somebody's house for that have nothing to do with taking their stuff, right?
Well, I wouldn't say there's lots. Usually you break into either steal the stuff or in this case, kill people.
Yeah. Well, but that occurs, that people come into a home and kill people, right?
Right, but my big problem with that is when you do that, you bring a weapon.
Well, who's to say that this intruder...
Also, pay very close attention to the lawyer who's attempting to get this murderer off, an accomplice in the war on white people. Pay very close attention when they show his picture at the end. This is somebody that's trying to protect an individual who annihilated a white family. But yet, when Mark Dice made the video about the war on white people, there were all black hands pointing at him. Let me ask you guys a question. How many of those black hands have pulled the trigger on a white family? More or less than the amount in this particular video.
Didn't have a weapon.
Why would you use their weapon if you brought one?
Because that's a better weapon. Let's say you would admit that people can go into a home for one reason, and then something else can occur, right?
Yes.
Right? Somebody could have come in for the purpose of stealing something, and then Mr. Jackson comes down, Jan Jackson, and he shoots Jan Jackson. That could have happened, right?
The reason I dislike that theory is because if you're going to kill someone while you're, burglarizing their home, you kill people that startle you, that confront you. Why would you kill someone that's in bed that hasn't even seen you? That's the first person that was shot.
Oh, who was the first person that was shot?
His sister.
That's your theory.
The evidence spells that out. There are two sets of footprints in the hallway. Now, he told me he was shot out by his father, and then he crawled around after that. So I don't know why there's any bloody footprints. Okay. The footprints start in his bedroom, or you can see the footprints. You can follow these.
The objections are ruled. You can answer.
You can see enough of a footprint, heel, toe. That's what I'm talking about. Dark red, walking from the area of his bedroom out into the hallway. You can see where that footprint continues, steps over Dad, and then the footprints are now, and it looks like he stood there for a little bit, potentially, and then there are lighter footprints on the way back. When we came into contact with him, he's sitting in the back of the hallway. And while we're there, he crawls out. But while you're standing there looking at the carpet, you're thinking to yourself, well, that story he told me earlier doesn't seem to make sense in my opinion.
They exit the room because that is the room where he shot himself. Not out in the downstairs living room where this supposed struggle with this alleged intruder took place. The spatter and the footprints prove to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the defendant was in his bedroom when he shot himself in the foot.
As you saw in some of the crime scene videos of the body cams of these officers as they moved through this house, this is a family that took pride in their family. They were a great family. They took great pride in all the vacations they took, all of the things that they did together, trips that they went on, accomplishments that the kids did, and the Eagle Scouts. These pictures and pictures like this were all over the walls of this home. Why would Alexander Jackson kill his family? It makes no sense. This was a normal family.
This was not a normal family, and it makes plenty of sense. If you pay attention to the first 36 seconds of this video, these questions that this high-paid lawyer, who is someone who's complicit in the quote-unquote war on PC people, is being dishonest.
This was a happy family. There's simply no motive for Alex to do this.
The defense, ladies and gentlemen, stood up here and clicked through a bunch of family pictures and accused the state of trying to inflame the passions of the jury. You're smarter than that. They want you to find some significance and some relevance in the fact that when Sabrina and Alexander Jackson were little and they went on a bunch of family vacations, that this family was happy. I'm sure they were. I hope they were. What you don't see in any of those photographs or any pictures that are recent of this family, and you ask yourself what goes on behind closed doors and you don't know. No recent family photos. And witness after witness after witness that the defense put up, they did a good job of testifying about the defendant's character 4 or 5 years ago. The same 4 or 5 years ago, if not more, that you see in these photographs. There aren't recent family pictures of the Jacksons hanging on those walls. The only recent pictures of the Jacksons are then laid out on a cold slab in the medical examiner's office. Because the defendant murdered his family, ladies and gentlemen. That's the only scenario in this situation that makes sense. That's the only scenario in this situation that is supported by and consistent with the evidence that was found. This was not some random intruder that breaks in and executes a family that he doesn't know with a gun that he didn't bring with the hope to steal things that are never stolen. Where there's a struggle with a huge man and a tall man, a black man with green shoes wearing all black and a ski mask with gloves on. Makes no sense. The murderer in this case that you're looking for, ladies and gentlemen, is seated right behind me. And that murderer is Alexander Jackson.
All right. As to each of the 3 counts, form of verdict 2 has been executed. We, the jury, find the defendant, Alexander Jackson, guilty of the offense of murder in the first degree.
When it comes to the Jackson family, unfortunately, they were unable to survive the suburbs. We also have more people having a difficult time surviving the suburbs, more familicide. Yet every time this kind of thing happens, these communities are quote unquote shocked. Let me ask you a question. Let's examine that. Why are these communities shocked? Are these communities shocked because the information about what they do to each other is withheld from them by the mainstream media that's feeding them a constant narrative of overemphasis on what we do? Are they shocked because of denial, and when they can no longer deny it because these things are right in their face, they act as if they're shocked, a pseudo emotion? Why are these communities shocked? Let me know in the comment section what you think. Convicted embezzler sentenced for execution-style killing of his elderly adoptive parents. Attack staged to look like a robbery. Let me guess. I wonder what the description was that he gave of the alleged robber. A convicted embezzler was sentenced on Wednesday to 2 consecutive life sentences for the cold case execution-style killing of his elderly adoptive parents for their $180,000 inheritance. Again, staged it to look like a burglary. William Roger Campbell was convicted on January 20th of 2 counts of first-degree murder in the killing of his adoptive parents, Bill and Ina Campbell, 81 and 82. They were very loving and compassionate grandparents, Sean Campbell, the defendant's son, testified during the victim impact statements, Clarksville Now reported. And we'll check this out. Growing up, life wasn't always the greatest, but they were always there, always by my side to help me with anything I needed. If I ever needed someone to talk to, a shoulder to lean on, or anything I needed, they did everything they could to help me as best as they could. They'd do anything for me. There is nobody walking the face of the earth that will have anything good to say about him, the defendant. He's been nothing but a plague and just a virus to anyone he has ever been around, Sean Campbell said. I just want the court to be aware of the fact that the deep-seated hatred that I have for the defendant goes deeper than anyone will ever understand, Sean Campbell said. Sounds very different than what happens when somebody takes the life of a black victim, doesn't it? Campbell's attorney, Joseph Allen Price, called the punishment for his client, who's 64, cruel. At this point, what sentences the judge imposes, frankly consecutive or concurrent for that matter, will be a death sentence for Mr. Campbell, said Price, according to Clarksville Now. Being 64 years old at this point in time, if I'm right, he'd be 160 or 135 before he'd be eligible for parole. Well, guess what? Those people who were kind enough to raise him will never be eligible for parole because they're dead. The couple was found dead in their Tennessee home in 2010. Their house was ransacked. Each had been shot once in the head. Campbell was arrested in Georgia more than a decade later in July of 2021. So the law enforcement system, while in Tennessee, they're pulling Tyree Nichols out of his car and murdering him bloody in the street, they allowed this man to take a vacation to Georgia. A grand jury indicted him on 2 counts of murder in the first degree. At his sentencing, Shelby County Assistant District Attorney Mary Ann Bell argued for the most severe punishment for Campbell, who she said is a probation violator convicted in 1989 for embezzlement. The defendant is a dangerous offender whose behavior indicates little or no regard for human life and no hesitation about committing a crime where the risk to human life is high, she said. According to Clarksville Now, he murdered both of his parents, 2 good people in this community, a veteran, a former officer, and a bailiff, and a homemaker. And both of them had to die for him to inherit their estate, worth almost $180,000. The judge appeared to agree with that assessment during his sentencing. Let me ask you guys a question. Of the stories that we've talked about thus far, how many of them did you run across in the mainstream media? Did you run across any of these stories in the mainstream media? Now, let me ask you guys a question. How is it that the real estate in the suburbs is so high when the families can't even make it out? Double murder. Campbell gets 2 consecutive life sentences for killing his elderly parents. William Roger Campbell, who is 66, convicted of the 2010 murder of his parents, was given 2 life sentences to be served one after another in court on Wednesday. His adopted parents, Bill and Ina Campbell, were 82 and 81 years old when Campbell shot them execution style in their beds in the early morning of January 28th of 2010. Campbell claimed his parents were still alive when he left at 7 a.m. that morning, but the couple were creatures of habit. Investigation revealed that meticulous medicine log entries that Ina Campbell kept stopped abruptly on the 27th, and the morning newspaper that Bill enjoyed reading were still in the mailbox, dated for the 28th and 29th. Campbell was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder on January 20th. Sean Campbell, son of the defendant, testified one last time against his father in an emotional victim impact statement. They were very loving and compassionate grandparents, Sean testified. Growing up, life wasn't always the greatest, but they were always by my side to help me with anything I needed. If I ever needed someone to talk to, a shoulder to lean on, anything I needed, they did everything they could to help me as best as they could help me. They'd do anything for me. There is nobody walking the face of this earth that will have anything good to say about the defendant. He's been nothing but a plague and just a virus to anyone he's ever been around, Sean said. I just want this court to be aware of the fact that the deep-seated hatred that I have for the defendant goes deeper than anybody will ever understand, Sean said. I never had a relationship with my father, and that hurt. So we have to ask the question, where was the father? Because this kind of family structure and these kind of family dynamics never exist with these people. And what's sad about that is there's even Black content creators on YouTube who attempt to perpetuate that narrative. But those people don't have the courage or the honesty to ever do content about situations like this. Anybody who's ever had him in their life has a horrible story to tell. And I hope that this court decides to put him away for life and that he never sees the light of day again. I hope that the rest of his life, somebody is telling him what to do. Campbell declined to testify or make a statement during the sentencing. Assistant District Attorney Mary Ann Bell outlined her arguments to Judge Robert Bateman for consecutive life sentences instead of concurrent. The state submits that the defendant is a dangerous offender whose behavior indicates little or no regard for human life and no hesitation about committing a crime where the risk to human life is high. The state submitted that 5 enhancement factors to consider. Campbell is a convicted felon, convicted in 1989 for embezzlement, and violated his probation in 1990 by obtaining money by a fraudulent check. Bell said this coincides with the motive of greed that the defendant had when he killed his parents. Bill and Ina were especially vulnerable because of their age. The Campbells weren't in the best of health and took many types of medication. Campbell employed a firearm that he used to shoot both victims in the head, a .25 caliber handgun. The defendant expressed no hesitation to commit a crime when the risk of human life was at stake. He waited until his parents were asleep, hooked up to oxygen, and then executed them by shooting them in the head, then staged the house to make it look like a burglary and try to fool everyone. The abuse of the position of private trust. The defendant was trusted with taking care of his parents while he was in town visiting. They trusted him to drive them around, and they trusted him with their dog and the vet. He murdered both of his parents, 2 good people in this community, a veteran and former officer and a bailiff and a homemaker. And both of them had to die for him to inherit their estate, which was worth almost $180,000. So the pro-blue, pro-law enforcement community is really quiet about this. And this was a member of the blue crime-fighting law enforcement community who was taken out by a member of the population at large. And again, serial silence about it. Bell also argued that Campbell has shown no remorse, just like the other guy. The defendant still continues to deny responsibility, lacks any remorse. Despite the jury verdict, he denies responsibility. So the state submits he has no potential for any rehabilitation because he maintains that he did nothing, just like everybody else. Essentially, Your Honor, this defendant has placed greater value on money than his parents' lives, and that makes him a dangerous offender with little regard to human life, Bell said. So Campbell's attorney argued for a lighter sentence. Campbell's attorney, Joseph Allen Price, pointed out that his client is 64, so he will spend his life in prison either way. At this point, what sentence the judge imposes, frankly consecutive or concurrent for that matter, will be a death sentence for Mr. Campbell, said defense attorney Joseph Allen Price. Being 64 years old at this point in time, if I'm right, he'd be 160 or 135 before he would be eligible for parole. Duplicating the sentences at this point doesn't seem necessary. I think it would be a cruel and potentially inhumane punishment, just like how it was inhumane for him to execute his parents that did everything for him while they were asleep, kind of like that. The facts of this case will show that each victim was shot in the head, shot in a separate bedroom, said Bateman. The court calls to attention to that, and that makes those factual findings to show that it wasn't one event. The court finds that based on the fact that the first victim was murdered in one room and there had to be a time period before the second victim was murdered in a separate room, that given the severity of the crime and complete disregard for the life of both victims, the consecutive sentences are necessary. Okay, so they felt that consecutive sentences were necessary. This guy's not going to see the light of the day. Sadly, his parents didn't survive the suburbs, all right, which again is a common theme. So why these communities are shocked when they see this happen is purely performative. Just like this individual, one thing that these people like to do is if they don't kill the entire family, they like to kill family members, in particular, the wife, all right? Colorado man gets decades in prison for murdering wife after claiming she attacked him with a butcher knife, all right? A 47-year-old Colorado man will spend decades behind bars for killing his wife. A state judge in Jefferson County on Wednesday ordered Scott Lee Smith to serve a 30-year sentence in the Colorado Department of Corrections for fatally shooting his wife, 47-year-old Kanoquan Knox Smith, authorities confirmed to Law and Crime. According to a press release from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, deputies responded to a 911 call on November 1st regarding a possible shooting at a residence located at the 5400 block of West Ottawa Avenue. The caller later identified as Smith, told the dispatcher that he had shot and killed his wife in self-defense because she was trying to kill him with a butcher knife. His wife, as you can see right there, is Asian. Upon arriving at the address, first responders located the body of Canaquan Smith, who was pronounced dead at the scene. And one thing that you will note is it's very different. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Things really work in reverse. When it comes to white people in interracial relationships, one thing that you'll notice is that the most vile racist people, the most vile racist white males, tend to find relationships with Asian women. It's fascinating. Or they have an obsession with something in Asian culture, whether it's Asian women or whether it's anime, or they've spent a lot of time in Japan or spent a lot of time in China. It's fascinating. White racists love and adore Asian women. It is mind-boggling. And interestingly enough, there's not very much community chatter about it. Just something to think about, something to talk about. Authorities initially arrested Scott Smith at the scene of his wife's death and charged him with 1 count of first-degree murder, but he was released several days after prosecutors in the 1st Judicial District's Attorney's Office said there was a lack of evidence to support criminal charges. Smith maintains that he was acting in self-defense. Public court records also show that Scott Smith had filed for a divorce only a few weeks before the shooting. Now, let's just assume that he's telling the truth. We don't know if he is or isn't. Let's just assume that he's telling the truth. Passport bros, be careful. Don't find yourself in a situation where you go to jail for defending yourself from a disgruntled modern woman who's attacking you with a butcher knife. Just saying. Public court records also showed that Scott Smith had filed for divorce only a few weeks before the shooting. JCSO detectives continue to investigate the circumstances of Canaquan Smith's death, and 10 months following the fatal shooting, investigators obtained an arrest warrant for Scott Smith. He was taken into custody for a second time and charged with first-degree murder, as well as domestic violence and tampering with evidence. The DA's office wanted more evidence, and any DA's office is probably a little reluctant to prosecute unless they feel like there's enough evidence to win their case, JCSO Director of Public Affairs Jenny Fulton said in a statement to Oxygen in 2021. So they requested that we continue our efforts, and if we are able to develop a stronger case, then they would consider prosecuting again. Additionally, Smith's mother, Teresa Rhino, was arrested several days after her son was charged with being an accessory to a crime, attempt to commit tampering with physical evidence, and conspiracy to commit tampering with physical evidence. We worked the case very hard and were able to get it to a point where the DA's office is comfortable enough bringing charges against Scott Smith and his mom, a family crime, Fulton reportedly said. We believe that Rhino helped Scott conceal or dispose of evidence. Teresa Rhino, an accomplice to her son's AAPI murder. It's unclear what additional evidence investigators obtained, but Scott Smith last month pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder and also agreed to a sentencing enhancement for committing a violent crime causing death or bodily injury. His mother is scheduled to appear in court again on March 10th, and it is unclear if she has entered a plea. In an email to Law and Crime, a spokesperson for the 1st Judicial District Attorney's Office said that a press release on the case will be issued on Thursday afternoon. Okay? So, Canaquan Knox Smith, who is probably one of those hurry up and buy types, found herself an all-American individual and now finds herself in a suburban cemetery. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit the bell icon twice. Smash the like button, share this video out to all of your followers. Watch the video all the way through to the end. Make sure you click the links at the end of the videos. If you're not subscribed to my backup channels, watch the videos as they come up on your homepage, and I will catch you all on the next one. All right.